Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to the November RSCA in 5. RSCA at San Jose State stands for Research Scholarship and Creative Activity. This is a quarterly series of talks that we have sponsored by the Office of Research, and this is our flagship speakership series where we feature some of our amazing faculty and the work that they are doing in very specific topic areas. Today's RSCA in 5 focuses on community engaged research and learning, and I want to welcome everyone here in the room and online to our event today. We're going to have 5 awesome speakers, and what you're going to hear today is a little bit about how SJSU engages with the community, how it learns from the community, how it creates knowledge with the community in service of the community. So it's very inspiring work. We were delighted to have the folks that are going to speak today. And so we are just so excited to share this program with you. Our very first speaker, oh, actually, I should have gone through the slides and said, hello, my name's Emily Chan. I'm the Director of Research Engagement from the Office of Research. And again, I'm delighted to welcome all of you. More than anything else, I want to share this space with our faculty and our speakers as they share more about the work that they're doing. So first, I'd like to introduce Ellen Middaugh, our Interim Associate Dean from the Lurie College of Education. She is researching and guided by the question of how do youth become effective advocates for themselves and their communities in the digital age. She's going to speak more about her research and some of her methodologies, which I think are really inclusive. And so without further ado, Ellen.
Thanks so much. Perfect. All right. So I have, I think, 3 hats today. I am an associate professor in child and adolescent development, which is kind of where my research is grounded in youth civic engagement. I am currently the interim associate dean for the College of Education, and I am the lead for the new community engaged research cluster, which I hope all of you will consider joining. This will be an affinity group of scholars who are engaged in community engaged research. It's brand new. So far, we have a website, and we'll be hosting some events going forward to help people find each other, to collaborate, to kind of identify some best practices in collaborating with the community and kind of bringing in our community partners. Okay, so to share a little bit about my work today is really focused on community engaged research with young people. So I always like to introduce myself with, Emily already shared my guiding question. How can we best support capacity for informed, ethical, and effective advocacy for youth, for themselves and their communities in the digital age? So I focus a lot on emerging technologies, but most of my work is on the ground with my partners. So yes, I spend a lot of time talking with young people, learning from them, going through social media and seeing kind of how they're using it. But these lessons always come back to the ground with the community to think about how do they use these tools. So just to give you some examples of the projects that I do, and this QR code will get you to our website for the Clarion project, which I collaborate with Mark Felton on. So some of our work is, I would say most of the work focuses on civic action and social media. So learning from young people how they use social media to understand and address issues of public concern, and then taking those lessons and collaborating with teachers to update curriculum and create informed civic action projects. I also do some work related to climate hope, gender expansive, and trans youth. All right, so I really want to focus on kind of my approach for this. So really critical parts of my work is it's always collaborative. My collaborations with undergraduate researchers are crucial because they tend to be from our local community and they are young people themselves. I am no longer a young person. I have aged out of that window. And because my work is a little bit topic agnostic, it's always about civic engagement, but it may focus on transit issues so I try to collaborate with people from the communities that are most impacted by these, not to center myself, but to center the collaboration and the content knowledge. Methodology. I am a methodological pragmatist. I don't use just one methodology. So I tend to work in different phases. So one goal I have is to understand youth practices. So this is interviews, surveys, focus groups with youth, spending time looking at their products that they put online and how they want to express their views. And then I take those lessons and collaborate with youth themselves, teachers, community members to support their capacity for advocacy. So design research, participatory action research. It's really important to me when I'm working with youth is to connect them to an authentic audience that's going to take what they have to say seriously and use the information. And so in some of my work, I do a lot of work with the Escuela Popular in East San Jose, where we bring city planners, nonprofit folks, different people who pose questions that students can gather their own input and input from the community. And a critical part of this is asking the partners, how are you going to use this information? Okay, my do's, I want to really focus on the youth collaboration aspect. So when I think about my do's and don'ts, it's really important to me to not bring my perspectives on how they should be using social media or how they should be engaging, but to learn from them what they care about and hear from them, like, what are their challenges? And so that anything I'm suggesting, which might have been what I would suggest to begin with, but it's a response to their authentic needs. And so the other thing is it's really important to me to leverage our students here at San Jose who have the cultural capital, who have the age proximity, the near peer mentorship, because again, a lot of the young people I work with, they don't think I'm cool. They don't think I necessarily understand them. They do like that I listen to them, but it's really to create a community of practice between them, the community partners, their teachers. And I do this work sometimes in school, sometimes in out of school settings. And then last time, because I plugged the thing, I'm going to take 30 seconds. So when you're doing this kind of work, I just want to say it's really important to be realistic about the time it takes. One of my favorite quotes from one of my partners is partnerships move at the speed of trust. So if you're rushing to that peer-reviewed publication, that's not the right way to start this work. So you have to think about how it fits into your professional agenda. Reciprocity, so understanding what your partners need, probably not a peer-reviewed publication, and control. And when you're truly collaborating, your project is going to change. Okay, that was my apologies for the extra 30 seconds.
All right. Thank you, Ellen. That was terrific. And Ellen did such a great job of kind of centering the needs of the community, the ethical mindset that needs to be in place when engaging with the community. So, and I think that you'll see all of that exemplified by our speakers today. So we're going to kind of launch into the rest of the featured speakers. As a reminder, we're recording today's events. All of you in the audience here in the room and online, please begin to think about questions that you may have for the speakers. Just know that that Q&A period, though, will take place after all of the speakers have given their presentations. So we'll have a shared Q&A panel here at the front of the room. We'll do a quick switch out after our last speaker. And then here in the room, what we'll do is we'll circulate the mics to ensure that those who are tuning in virtually will be able to hear all of the questions in the room as well. If anyone needs to leave, please, at least in-person attendees, if you do need to leave, please do so during applause in between this session, in between the presentations. And for those of you who are here in person, I also want to invite you to our lunch that is immediately after, where we'll be able to continue our conversations with a meal. All right, so here is our schedule of presentations today. There's a QR code at the bottom of the screen that will take you to our webpage that shares more information about our speakers, their bios, their educational background. We really encourage you to connect if you would like to learn more, and I think all of the speakers will share more information about their projects as well. So without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Liliana Castrellon, Assistant Professor from the Department of Educational Leadership. She is going to present on Ella nos metió como la courage. So please give her a round of applause.
Awesome. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. Oh, let me set my timer because 5 minutes is really fast. All right, so today I'm going to be talking a little bit about a research project that we recently wrapped up that is focused in the state of North Carolina. It's part of a larger study that is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation with this beautiful team you see right here. And this portion, focused in North Carolina, was really conducted by myself as well as our graduate assistant, Citlali Rendon Guzman at Cal State Fresno. In this project, I want to really begin by focusing on the story of Victoria. Victoria is an undocumented student, and in our interview with her, she recounted when she was talking with her high school counselor about college admissions. She disclosed to him her undocumented status, and in the state of North Carolina, which is a locked-out state, meaning undocumented students do not qualify for in-state resident tuition, he looked at her and questioned why she was applying. He didn't even let her continue talking. He cut her off and essentially told her that she should get married and fix her paperwork that way, like other Mexican girls do. At that moment, she knew that it was her and her mama, soy yo y mi mamá, in this educational journey. They didn't stick to themselves. They reached out to a local pastor who happened to be the father of an undocumented college student. He then connected them with other community resources, and that is where their journey began in community organization and working closely with others to continue that college access journey in a state where undocumented students are prevented essentially from going to higher education. And this was a common narrative that we found amongst our participants. In this portion of the study, we focus on 3 sets of women, all mothers and daughters, that we interviewed together in the comfort of the space that they chose. So we interviewed them either in the community organization that they worked with, in a Zoom meeting where they got to be in the comfort of their home, and or in the church, actually. So we were in a space with them, and our interviews were held in Spanish so that they would feel comfortable sharing with us. I'm going to jump to findings and implications because I have 3 minutes, and this is going to take a while, y'all. So in this study, to analyze the data, we used 2 different frameworks, one of Mujerista pedagogy and one of agency. Mujerista essentially means womanist, right? And so this was a way to talk about the ways in which women often build these political ideologies and challenge deficit thinking, primarily Latina women, through this framework, through this theory. So we put together this notion of Mujerista agency, talking about the Latina mothers and their daughters co-constructing knowledge and activism and agency as they were learning about the community, as they were learning about the educational systems and how to navigate these difficult barriers that are legally keeping them out. So we coined this as intentional acts of resistance to reshape, where is it? intentional acts of resistance to reshape inequitable and anti-immigrant educational policy structures in alliance with immigrant-serving community organizations. The quote at the top is from Patricia, where she's saying, when she began to get involved with the community is when she really learned about courage and empowerment. She's saying, ellas nos dio la courage. She gave us the courage. That she's talking about Marlene, one of the community organizers. And so as these women are talking through what they're experiencing in the community, they're also challenging the deficit discourses of Latina, Latino, Latinx, and Latina families, primarily in education, where they're assumed to not take part in education, in their child's education, when really a lot of times educators have to reframe their thinking and look and examine and acknowledge and validate the ways in which parents can be involved. It doesn't always happen in the schools because we know that families will often trust community organizations more so than they will trust institutions of schooling. And so I want to leave us with the quote here from Diana, where she's talking about her daughter and the engagement in which her daughter took part. And Diana is Patricia's mother. The work in which they were doing is they were going out to the legislator. They had gone to Washington, D.C. They were at school board meetings. And so together she's saying, you know, these are young folks that are doing this work, that are involved, and they are empowering us. We see them, and we as mothers then become empowered. Thank you. Oh, and here's my Linktree information.
Thank you. That was terrific. All right. I'd like to welcome to the podium Dr. Moctezuma Garcia. He's the assistant professor. He's an assistant professor in the School of Social Work, and he's going to present on Project Compa.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. Awesome, thank you. So my name is Moctezuma Garcia, and I'll be presenting on Project Compa, which stands for Comunidades Organizando Más Prevenciones Agradables. The English version is up there. One of the things I do want to emphasize about this study is I just recently got funded for this, and it's a 2-year implementation science mixed method study. So thank you. And the overall goal of this research study is really looking at the implications of racism and HIV among the Latino community. One of the things I will emphasize, I am using the term Latino, and I really appreciate Liliana using the extended version Latino, X, and Latine. However, when I was working with the community, a lot of times they told me they prefer the term Latino. They emphasize that Latine and Latinx is more academic and more from outsiders. So it's really important to be mindful about the language that we use when we're working with the community. And the majority of the populations were Latino, sexual, and gender minorities. So the overall goal of the study is really looking at ending the HIV epidemic, which is the government's plan on the left-hand side. So one of the things I want to emphasize is that they're promoting diagnosis, which is HIV testing, as well as treating people, which is through medications for HIV, and prevention, and that's where PrEP comes in. One of the things I want to emphasize, there's really extraordinary biomedical interventions that prevent HIV transmission. However, they're not very useful if the community doesn't want to use them. So this is part of the study in regards to exploring the implications behind that. So another important point is the last one in regards to the respond, and this is where the molecular HIV surveillance or cluster detection and response is occurring, which is on the right-hand side. So the important thing with this process is that they're identifying people living with HIV, and they're not notifying them that they're taking their HIV genetic sequence to identify them. So it's causing a lot of controversy in the community in regards to is this ethical and implications it has to trust with public health departments and so forth. So once they identify an individual, they go through their history that's available through the government of identified partners. And that's how the cluster expands. So right here are other people living with HIV. And over here in the risk network are people who are HIV negative. So they're not aware that they're part of this study or project, but they're being linked and connected to that. So what's happening now is the government is investigating all these cases, people within the cluster as well as outside. So one of the things I do want to emphasize is in regards to the model that I'm using, which is CBPR, community-based participatory research. This is really important in regards to conceptualizing the social problem. I'm not going to have time to go through the entire slide. But the main thing I do want to emphasize in the context is it's really important to clearly identify the problem that you're exploring and how it affects different populations in different domains. So this is going from the political, social, and so forth. Another important thing that I want to emphasize on is Dr. Chavez's research, which looks at positionality as an insider-outsider. I really like this article because it goes into greater detail about the complexity of insider-outsider perspective. Because I'm a Latino sexual minority, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be accepted from the population that I'm doing research. So I may consider myself an insider, but the community may not. One of the reasons is in regards to certain privileges that I have. Having a PhD, not being born and raised in the community may impact the dynamics. So there's some advantages and disadvantages to being an insider and an outsider. The main thing that I want to emphasize that was mentioned before, that CBPR takes a lot of work. You need a lot of patience. You also need to meet your partner, which is the collaborators, where they're at and how to move through the process. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was terrific. I hope all of you are generating questions. These are absolutely fascinating. Next, I'd like to welcome to the podium Estela Inda. She's the Research Services and Social Sciences Librarian here at the University Library, and she's going to talk about resourcing your community to build inclusive archives. Estela.
And I remember to use the pointer. So we'll see if I remember today. Hi, everybody. Stella Inda. I'm briefly going to give a little bit of background. I worked for the public library here in the same building for 19 years before joining the university. And this is kind of showing where my interest in research started from in working with the community. So as you know, the California Room here in the building is our local history archive. And it was interesting to me to see the different collections we have in there. And it's a great place for primary resources. And you would think they would have everything related to the local history that's relevant, important. But that was not the case. So I'm born and raised in San Jose. My family is a very large family. We've been here for generations. I have an idea of a lot of the areas through family stories, and this is kind of where it tied in for me. A student came in, a researcher who was working on his doctorate, and asked about local lowrider history. And I was very surprised to find out from him that Lowrider magazine started in San Jose. The first 5 years it was published here in San Jose by former San Jose State students. We did not have very much, and what we did have was very negative about the community. And I was actually really surprised about that because I had uncles that were were and still are very active in the lowrider community. And I'm like, what? What do you mean it's a bad thing? Well, you see the no cruising signs, but why is it bad? I just never understood it. So that started a research because I had a lot of local community ties. My boss at the time said, hey, let's see what you can find. So I started doing research, working with the ACNA director from the university library to see what resources she was aware of, to see what I could find in the building, in our collections. And again, it was very limited, but there was at least not nothing. So what I did for a year or 18 months was read everything I could and pull out names. And then I would go on Facebook, Instagram, to the local lowrider community and see who I could still find that's still around to help us document that history. And it helped me build a lot of connections through the community. It also revealed a lot more inequities in our own collection that needed to be fixed. So what I did was, based off working with the community, we had exhibits based off what the community was willing to let me borrow and put on display based off the research I was able to do. So this is the first exhibit, use a laser, San Jose, King of Story, San Jose Lowriders Culture, and it literally focused just in San Jose. I wanted to get San Jose's history because it's not mentioned, but in 2 chapters in 2 books out of 20 books. And that was devastating to me. So I was able to get quite a response from the community. We had over 200 people in this room for panel events. I just shared everything and anything I could, creating that activism within the community again. And it was amazing to see the response. And people came all the way from New Mexico to see this exhibit, just to remember the times that they were here. But what it did also, during those panel events, it revealed more inequities, like I said, by the questions that were being asked. Were you here at this event? Were you at the Hellier riots? Do you remember when Community Alert Patrol had to come out and document the police brutality? All these stories that were being told that people just, there's no documentation of any of this. So it led to Eastside Dreams, the untold story of East San Jose, and that led us to getting even more of the history documented for the East San Jose, which is undocumented, the activism, the development, the community, what they had to do to get resources just in that part of town. So that has become my mission. And this is the next steps, how I want to keep it going. I plan on working on the community connections I've already made with the community. And I'm willing, as always, to build that trust with them, understand it's a process, be honest about what you can do and what you can't do. If something changes, let them know. Don't just wait for them to ask, but foster those relationships and be aware. If anything pops up on Facebook now that is relevant to certain people, I send it to them just because I know, and they do that to me too. And that's helped foster that. Even this summer, we needed to do an exhibit last minute, called the Lowrider Council. Hey, do you have some stuff? Do you have people I can talk to? Yes, and we were able to pull it off. So the connection keeps growing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Estella. That was terrific. All right. So if you'd like to connect with Estella, here are a couple of QR codes. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to welcome Dr. Wayne Japanda to the podium. He is an assistant professor in the Sociology and Interdisciplinary Social Sciences Department, and he's going to talk about lesson plans for liberation. Please welcome Dr. Japanda.
Testing. Cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Wayne Joe Panda. I go by he, him pronouns. I come to you from Hayward, California, also known as unceded Ohlone territory. I am an assistant professor who just started this semester in Asian American Studies. And thank you. And as well as housed within CIS. So shout out to the folks and friends there. And I'm here to talk about my 10-year plus project with the amazing folks at Gabriela DC, Lesson Plans for Liberation, Resistance Narratives of Filipino Trafficked Teachers in the US. You might be surprised, like Filipino teachers are trafficked? Huh, they are. And there are ways how that connects to the histories, sadly, of US colonialism and imperialism in the Philippines. So, this project spans over 10 years of community-engaged research and collaboration. Back in 2013, when I was actually an undergrad, I had the privilege of learning under and being mentored by an amazing group of folks called Washington, D.C.'s chapter of Gabriela USA, a grassroots Filipino migrant rights organization that has been campaigning for and works directly with this group of trafficking survivors within this project. Gabriela's name originates from Gabriela Silang, the first Filipino woman to lead revolt and revolution against Spanish colonization in the Philippines. And like the name embodies, the organization commits itself to decolonial campaigns of liberation and empowerment for Filipinos around the world. Now, Gabriela discovered that between 2009 and 2014, and operating under the guise of a recruiter for various employment agencies, labor trafficker Isidro Rodriguez lured over 300 teachers from the Philippines to the United States with promises of H-1B visas, full-time teaching positions, and provided housing. My work centers on the group of Filipino migrant teachers who were labor trafficked to the US, and more importantly, their collective resistance. Together, in collaboration, we asked the question, how are Filipino teachers trafficked to the US, and how do they respond? How do they resist? And these are some of the photos of those meetings, interviews, as well as some of the political campaigns we've been putting on in collaboration together. Methodologically, this research provides and utilizes participatory action research, artifact analysis, and critical ethnography through one-on-one interviews and within what we call Kwentuhan Talk Story Group sessions with over 50 Filipino trafficked teachers across 5 states. The way I engage my research methods is greatly shaped by the work of Maori scholar Lina Tuiwai-Smith, specifically her work Decolonizing Methodologies. And one of these decolonial methods, inspired from friend and mentor Dr. Valerie Francisco Menchavez, is called Kwentuhan, a prominent talk story methodology which holds a distinct place within Filipino culture. The practice of Kwentuhan revolves around informal communal storytelling of both personal narratives and collective history as a process of communal healing. So through these interviews and these Kwentuhan talk story sessions, we've been able to find and identify the following, right? There's roots of coloniality, unfortunately, within the processes that have led to systems of labor brokerage in the Philippines. To quote the term from my mentor, Dr. Robin Rodriguez, the Philippines brokering Filipino migrant labor as a system and as a process to push Filipino citizens outward to work abroad rather than supporting them within the homeland. This leads to a rise in Filipino labor trafficking, as well as allows us through these narratives and documentation of interviews, talk story sessions, to challenge assumptions of who is trafficked, challenge assumptions of the narratives of undocumented community members within and outside of the Filipino community, and also forcing a new view of not just immigration reform, but also resistance to these systems that have oppressed our communities for so long. And lastly, we look at Gabriela DC as a space for disrupting coloniality, providing survivors with a political education and resources, but more so a space to take lead, opportunities for survivors to self-advocate for themselves. So as I finish up, through my time at and alongside Gabriela DC, it was clear that this is not a story of silence and obedience, but of collective resistance, a radical healing. The Gabriela teachers denounced neocolonial conditioning tools and stereotypes. The teachers shared sentiments of transformation from victim to trafficking survivor to, more importantly, and to this day, anti-imperialist community organizers. The teachers became the core members and leads of Gabriela, leading campaigns, educating their communities around preventing trafficking, community outreach, and of course, the usual protests outside the Philippines consulate. Lastly, where we go from here, I'm proud and very excited to share that in partnership with a good friend of mine, artist and collaborator Angel Trasso, and with 2 of the teachers, we actually created a visual novel that is open and available for our community. This is a tool that's used for our community to better understand what's going on around labor trafficking, why teachers are trafficked from the Philippines to the US, and to better understand how we engage our communities and support their learning and unlearning of these narratives. Right. So when we work with the teachers, we ask them, what do you want to do? Well, as teachers, we love visuals with our students. We love teaching them. So let's create a visual novel. And lastly, my project's significance is also through the way the research is conducted. The images on the right is the epitome of community engaged scholarship to me. It's both a struggle and a labor, but also full of joy, of community building, a lot of trust through relationships. The teachers found that the storytelling kwentuhan as a method of healing and relationships is so important, and as the proudest moment for myself in this project, in this image, is of the teachers celebrating the fact that through our interviews, through our collective liberatory project together, they were able to apply for what we call the T visas, trafficking visas, which would allow them to stay, remain, and work in the United States, and more importantly, reunite with their families, petitioning for them to come to the Philippines or to the United States after 5 or 10 years being apart. So I want to thank Gabriela USA, DC, my mentors and the amazing folks in that community for the work we've done together. We're going to continue doing this work together, continue creating in collaboration and centering our community's needs. And if you want to take a look at that visual novel, feel free to scan the QR code. And just thank you so much for this time and for having me.
Thank you. Those were terrific. So now we're going to transition to the next part of our program, which is the Q&A panel. So we're going to move a couple of tables forward, center them here, and then we'll invite all of our speakers to join us. So I hope all of you in the room have been collecting all of your questions, as well as those who are online. At this point, I'd like to open it up to the crowd. Does anyone have a first question that they'd like to start us off with?
For something the speaker said. Hello, hi. So I'm Michael. I'm from Community University. Gentleman on the end, you mentioned. I was hoping you and the others could comment a little bit more on something you said and about the Latino versus Latina versus Latinx. I heard from you, and I wonder if you can talk more about it. But I'd also like to hear from the rest of the panel more about your comment. If we can maybe expand on that from everybody and everyone else in the room too. If you have any comments, please.
There you go.
Great. Thank you so much for the question. So there's been a lot of conversations in regards to using Latine, which is the Spanish version of Latinx. However, the community, especially among sexual and gender minorities, which is LGBTQA+, have expressed to me that they prefer the term Latino. And this is where qualitative research is really important in regards to interviewing people from the community. And it's not only based on one study. I've done 3 studies in Puerto Rico, Texas, and California. And all the populations have told me they either prefer Latino or Hispanic. A lot of times they indicate that it's outsiders that are trying to push these concepts onto them. So if we really want to be inclusive, I think Liliana did an excellent job. Which I sometimes do is using the slashes of Latino, X, and E to be really inclusive, because otherwise you're just ignoring other people's preferred language or how they perceive themselves.
Yeah, and to build a little bit on that, it's definitely one of those terms that has become a political term, right? Especially when we're thinking about identity and how identities are politicized. The terms that I use, and I use this quite a bit, in working with students who are working on their dissertations, often when they're working with minoritized populations, I'll ask them to write about why they're using the terms that they're using to describe the communities. So I'll have them write a note on language, a paragraph explaining the terminology that they're using, right? I tend to say Latina, Latino, Latinx, Latine, and yes, it's long, but it's honoring all the different identities that we know of so far, right? I'll say Black and African American communities, right? Because folks use different terms. I'll say Native, Native American, Indigenous communities, because I'm using the different terms. And yes, it takes longer, but again, it's one of those things that's centering multiple identities as opposed to the term that I'm using to say something quicker or say something faster. And being in the academic space, this becomes an issue when it comes to publications, when we're limited on word space, when we're limited on characters, especially like in those abstracts that we have to write, right? And it feels dishonest to change language or to just say Latinx or Latine. And so that's why a lot of times I just put the slash and I don't put spaces. So that it's like one word is like 3 words put together, right? But it becomes difficult in those academic spaces, but it's a way to still find how to honor the community and the terms that they're choosing.
I don't have anything to add on that specifically, other than to say, I agree, adopt the same practices, but something has come up in my research where it's how do we refer to young people? And so I got corrected in something where it was like, well, it's more authentic to refer to them as kids because this ethnography said that that's how they refer to themselves, and calling them students makes them feel, and I was like, well, let me actually ask the young people that I'm working with. And so again, like as you are kind of partnering with the community, just for all of those identities, it's really important to kind of listen to how people refer to themselves and incorporate that language.
We've got a question from online from Lori. She said, question to Moctezuma and others. Can you say more about specific challenges and successes in forming and maintaining collaborative relationships with community partners and informants?
Thank you for that question. The biggest challenge is time and patience. In regards to being a researcher, you're used to being able to do everything and hitting the road running. However, when you're collaborating with the community, you need to have a lot of patience and you need to build these relationships with community. And that's where positionality, I think, is really important. Don't assume just because you're from a community, racial or ethnic wise, that they're going to accept you. And take into consideration multiple privileges that you may have in regards to collaborating with the community. A lot of the time, it's just me being in a space and participating or just observing. Just being there has significance, especially among the Latino community, especially communities of color that I worked with. A lot of it is really dependent on being there with them when they're addressing issues in the community and supporting them. Even if it's just a social event, they're throwing a party, a meal, get together, it's really critical that you're there. So that's part of the patience in regards to not doing anything and just being there in the environment and engaging and establishing these relationships. The biggest challenge too is that a lot of historically oppressed populations are dealing with government mistrust, medical mistrust, or just mistrust in general, or being exploited, especially in regards to research studies. What they find is a lot of outsiders that are not from the community come into the community, take their knowledge, and don't give them credit for that. So the way I see myself as a researcher is a facilitator to amplify their voices, but also offer them an opportunity to share the spotlight. So one of the things I did forget to mention, my partner research partner is a co-investigator, Jorge Cepeda at San Francisco AIDS Foundation. I was going to invite him to come, but he's in San Francisco and 5 minutes is very limited. So, but patience and establishing relationships and trust is really key.
Yeah, I'll just build on that a little more briefly because I'll be repeating a lot, but that availability is super important. So some of the learners I work with are adult learners. They take class at like 8:45 at night. I show up. When I got this job, I moved to San Jose, even though I loved where I lived because I knew I was going to be working in the community and was not that familiar with it. And so I spent really just about 5 years like publishing other things and getting to know the community before I really tried to work with them so that I understood who I'm working with, and being able to show up when they have an event or that kind of thing really is kind of the building of trust. In working with youth, there's a challenge, two challenges. One, there's always a power imbalance that is because they are in adult youth spaces. There's a lot of work trying to unpack those power imbalances, but that typically is only done effectively when you're working in very long periods of time together. If you're working in a school setting, it's very difficult. And so more kind of, I don't necessarily promise to disrupt all of those imbalances, but be more conscious of them and think about like, what can we do in this space and what can't we do? And with young people, if you are working with them, they're not there for very long. And so the kinds of work you can do with a group over like 3 years of an organizing group, or there's a lot. And so I always have to think about like, all right, what is it that I think people can take away from this time together and within these constraints that move towards kind of the goals that I want to see.
I will say that for me, in my experience, a lot of the challenges was building that trust in the first place. Many of the community members have been exploited in different ways by researchers coming to the east side to do a study, and then they find out that's just numbers. They just turned into numbers. There's people trying to collect the history for their own gain and not for the community purpose. So a lot of it was, for me, was taking every meeting, taking my time, building that trust, really being honest about every step of what I can do, what the institution can do, what the goal is overall, and showing them, taking them into the space in the California room. This is what we're offering. This is what we're hoping to do. This is the ultimate goal. And then always referring to them. I had a lot of people that didn't trust each other within the community that would give me one version and another person would come give me another version. And I didn't question either. Mm-hmm. That was their account. That was what they said. This is how I'm documenting on their end. And this is how I'm documenting on their end. And I did not ruffle. I didn't get involved in any of their arguments that could have been built more mistrust within our institution. Also, another one is the time. I took every meeting and I didn't know if that person was going to help or not help or have people for me to meet, but I took every conversation. I was able to track down people, and it's kind of funny because the one person I couldn't find for weeks, I ended up finding through my grandmother, who I was at her house every day, and I mentioned this name every day. And finally, I think it's 6 weeks in. I think I'm going to have to let this one go and move on to somebody. She, oh, who are you looking for? And I said the name. Oh, she's at church. And I'm like, 6 weeks, Wella, 6 weeks. I said this name every day. But it was because she trusted my grandmother at church that she trusted me to even take the first meeting. Right. So it's establishing that trust. I don't try to cash in on my family, but it's really funny. My family is somehow tied into everything I do. But that's being born and raised here and having a large family has helped me propel and hopefully benefit to the community.
I know we have a couple other questions out there, but I'll just echo everything here. Time, I think, is one of the most difficult things on top of relationship building. And often there's not enough time to really build the relationships that you want to build with the community, right? I know with being funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they gave us 10 months to do our study. That is not enough time to work with undocumented communities and community organizations and educational spaces, right? So we kept pushing and pushing and submitting those no-cost extensions in ways, and we would tell them this is not enough time to do qualitative research. So you really have to ground what you're doing and that you're being there to honor the community and the space.
Is it still okay for me to answer? Okay, cool. Wow, thank you so much for everything that folks have shared. I come to the table and to this space and this campus, honestly, as a community organizer first and as a community healer. So before any thoughts of interviews or even documenting anything, it was through my time learning from Gabriela, DC, and the teachers as a community organizer, as a baby community organizer back in 2013. And it was through them asking, well, Wayne, we know you know how to do research and interview as an undergrad student during your time. Are you down to just interview the teachers and collect the data and kind of get all that information and narratives together? And I was like, yeah, let's do that. It's through that communication. It's through the time, the trust being built. And my lovely wife, Carla's over here. We actually moved to DC for her work and for me to organize with Gabriela and later on Migrante DC, another organization there, to continue with the campaign with the teachers. So for us, it's the teachers became our family. I know, there's those lineages of and divisions around how you work with the communities you research with and about, but they were the folks who were taking care of us because it was a new space for us. They're our aunties and uncles. They're the folks that we spent and broke bread with, and it's through that trust, it's that transparency that we're able to create beautiful moments, and not just research, but liberatory processes for our community healing.
Thank you. I think we have more questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the panel, for your insights about working in the community and making those partnerships work. I want to piggyback off of something Doctora said and ask you about the university side of it. So what supports and understanding are you getting from the university in your community-based work, especially given now our push, and we are now, an R2? So how's that been for you in your process?
So when I started this work, I was at my previous institution at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is also an R2. And it's a small private institution. And moving to San Jose State, I definitely felt like I didn't have to justify why I was doing the work that I was doing as much as I did at my previous institution. However, I do really feel like there is always limitations in doing community work. Right now, we've been having a lot of conversations around scholarship of engagement, right? And how do you look at the work that you're doing in the community and connect that so that you're not doing just the work in the community, but you're also doing all the extra research to get tenure. Because we also, if we want to do this work, we got to have jobs, right? We have to be in these roles in ways to make sure that we're having a sustained livelihood so we could be with the community. So there's a lot of barriers there. And I think we always used to say at my previous institution that it was confused because it would tell us, well, we're an R2, so you have to do great in research. You also have to do great in teaching, and you have to do this and you have to do that. And we're like, well, tell us, so we can't do it all, right? And I think moving into this R2 status is something that San Jose State really needs to negotiate as they're negotiating what scholarship of engagement means. How much are they going to honor the community work and see the extra work that it takes to do community work than to just, write research papers where you're staying inside one room, right? So there's a big difference there, and we have to untangle how that matters and how much it matters.
I can add to that. I think it's really important for us to advocate for ourselves as faculty as well in regards to the limitations and knowing the structure of being an R1 versus R2 in a teaching institute, especially transitioning from a teaching institute to an R2 and the infrastructure to support us in doing the work. Because a lot of times we had to do our own budgets, we had to manage everything in our grant. And the larger the grant, the more complicated it is, especially getting multiple grants.
Yep.
One of the recommendations I would have for faculty as well as students is to identify writing groups for you to co-author and publish. That's one way, because currency for the school is the publications and the grants. So by having a writing team, identifying even people in this room where you can co-author on a publication of interest will help you in regards to promotion and excelling in the school.
Yeah, I'll just reinforce the collaborations. I don't think I could have the time or do what I do without the collaborations. I will say the strength of being at a CSU is community engaged work is recognized and valued. Our students, because we are a regional college, we have students who are from the local area. So for me, I began one of my projects simply because I didn't even think I would get anything out of it publication wise. I thought it would be a good opportunity for my students. And then it turned into, because I thought, oh, my students would be great leaders in this setting. And so, and they had some money so I could pay them, and it turned into a richer collaboration. I will say, both time and resources are more constrained. So I have a colleague at Stanford who they give stipends for the students to have transportation to the library that he collaborates with. I feel like I have this wealth of the students I'm bringing to the community have so much to offer in terms of having the connection and the relevance. And I've been blessed to get some money so I can at least pay them and cover their transportation. But I've had to show up to everything to get those resources. And the teaching load is such that, for me to have the time to show up to all of these things, I don't have a life in all other ways because I show up to all of these things. So.
So my research started prior to me joining SJSU. I'm going into my third year currently. But joining SJSU and still knowing the city background, I can say it's helped me because now I can really tap into both resources and still keep building the collaboration that I had prior, because I joined with the university with the director of ACNA. She was able to join me in these projects and support me and use her knowledge. Moving forward is also going to help me. There's a lot of people in the CSU system that are trying to do the same things in their own institutions, in their own areas. So I just see it as an opportunity to keep growing in the research and to tap into some hopefully bigger resources that I couldn't necessarily get from the city side of it. So that's.
I'll keep mine really short, but I was really excited when Estella was on this panel too, or in this session, because we met through the work at ACNA. I just started this fall, of course, but there's this fostering of collaboration that has me excited in my early start so far here at San Jose State. And it's the thinking and the collaboration around what community partners can we bring in to the theme of healing, community healing, and collective liberation, right? So bringing in folks that we've worked with for 5-10 plus years has been really exciting, and having those conversations and dreaming up the possibilities is something that I really appreciate here at San Jose State.
Thank you. I think we're at 12:04. Can we ask one more question? And then all right, one more question. No pressure.
Now I don't know if I should ask it, but this was for Doctora Castrillon. I wanted to ask for you to elaborate more on specific instances you've come across regarding deficit discourses or deficit ideology. And I know that could be its own session, but so I don't know. Thank you.
So it definitely can be its own session. And we actually had started this conversation last night in class. In our qualitative research class, Essie is one of our awesome EDD students. I see a couple of y'all here, and hopefully there's some of you online. But one of the questions that comes up often is, how do you respond when you're hearing those deficit discourses come from folks that you're interviewing or that you're working with, or even when it's coming from the community that you are engaged with. And that does happen quite a bit, particularly in this study. Not only was I hearing it, from students and parents reflecting on how educators have treated them, but also some of the same discourses being internalized by them, like other parents have to get more involved, right? Those types of discourses that continue to come up. So they come up in spaces where it's coming from majoritarian communities as well as minoritized communities. And in the process of while you're there as a researcher, depending on how you know the community, who you are, is a way in which you can break those down when you're in like an interview process versus when you are in a community space where you're at dinners together and you're having a conversation. But those ideologies do come up quite a bit in different ways. And I think as a researcher, it's our job to understand our role, back to positionality, as am I in a space where I should break that down? How do I respond here and now? But more so, how am I interpreting this in my role? Am I looking at it through an academic lens? Am I looking at it as a community member? So thinking through the different hats that we wear as well. That is extremely important especially in the qualitative space, but more so in the community space. Who are you at that moment? Are you going to be an academic? Are you a community member? How are you both an insider, outsider? There's a lot to negotiate and that one has to unpack. So with the research also comes the processing, comes the reflection as well that needs to happen while you are there, because you're not just going into the community and leaving, right? So think about those reflection spaces, think about your own role of power, your own positionality, and really consider that. How do you respond? Maybe at that moment you don't respond. Maybe it's later at another time you respond, but you have to think about how to do that first.
I also want to add, it's really important to take into consideration intersectionality and how multiple identities really give us different insight to exploring these questions that we're asking. And that's where qualitative data, I think, is really great, especially for communities of color, because I think a lot of what's been said on the panel is emphasis on storytelling, which really resonates with our community and really helps us to further conceptualize the more quantitative piece and asking the right questions. So one example for me was when I wrote this study, the qualitative semi-structured interview was written in English. And then I had my staff translate it to Spanish. And then I read it over and I was all like, this isn't what I was asking. But that's one of the privileges I had, was in regards to being able to be bilingual and understand the language and do the study in Spanish and English. So what I decided to do, which I had the power and authority to, which is also important to recognize, is to meet with my team and say, you know what, why don't we develop the study in Spanish and then translate it to English? Because my Spanish level is a lot lower than my English level. So if I'm having a hard time understanding the Spanish question, then that raises a red flag for me. And it allowed me to transition into another way to make it more acceptable for the community.
I'll just add, since I'm often more of an outsider in the communities I'm working with, like I'm older, I'm monolingual, I'm white. And so I am always mostly like I go to spaces I'm invited into. But the other thing is, one of my favorite things to do when I'm working with young people is we're learning something new together. Or I'm working in a bilingual classroom and I'm like trying to piece together my Spanish while they're working on there. And so it's, and we're learning like urban planning technology that none of us know because none of us knew the term flashing beacon before we did this street redesign project. And so in addition, is I think with working with young people, that deficit modeling is so common, especially when talking about like the internet and social media. Everyone first goes to like all the problems and all the ways they're wasting their time and all the ways they're at risk. And so again, for me, it's because I am typically coming in from an outsider perspective, I see my position in the goal is really like trying to understand and hear what people want and think about what resources I can bring to it and collaborate with my students and with the community partners to think about my goal here is not to come in and say like, here's how we're going to share power, or it's more like, what do you need? And so again, I never put all my eggs in one basket research wise, because I need to allow for a partnership to take the amount of time it needs. And I'll be doing other projects that will meet the publisher parish needs. And then I wanted to add one other responsibility piece, because I started a collaboration and now I feel responsible to continue it whether my funding runs out or not, and whether like I got a grant for something else and I'm like, I need to figure out how to honor this partnership so that either like this new thing I got will help them continue what they want to do, or and so that's just another piece that I don't take into account when I'm simply doing like a study of interviews with like that one I feel fine about wrapping it up when it's done because we don't have an ongoing relationship.
I'll say my approach was a little different. I allowed the person I was meeting with to kind of guide the conversation and tell me the issues they faced. I didn't, even though I did the research prior to meeting them, I was aware of certain things, but I never assumed they were a part of every issue that I saw from somebody from the East Side, from the lowrider community. I never assumed that they were at the Hellier riots, or they were arrested, or they got pulled over. I let them tell me what they're willing to tell me were their own issues and the way they believe they were perceived by the city, by the community. I didn't add any terms. I didn't put my own ideas in their head. I let them tell me their stories. So
Just to kind of reiterate what folks have been saying, and specifically for from Dean Medall, which is listening, right? It's really coming into and building with my specific community with the Gabriela DC teachers, like what is needed, right? Let's document the stories. Let's have interviews. Okay, for what purpose? Not necessarily to publish or not to kind of look all fancy and present this stuff, but because they needed those stories to be documented for their T visas, for tracking visas, so they could have their families come in, they could continue working in the United States. And then from there, having those honest conversations. Okay, what do we need from now? We've gotten that victory of your T visas. We have your families here. You saw those photos of all the little picnic we had together as we all reunited together in 2015, 2016. Let's create some artwork. Let's create some resources for our community to better understand what's going on around trafficking in the Filipino community. And better yet, right now, as I've been in conversation with many of the migrant family members and workers and teachers, we've been talking a lot about mental health, how the distance of these family members from one another for over a decade during their trafficking situation has led to such disparity around their mental health issues and mental health wellness. So me and a couple of the folks have started a Filipino healing circle around how we connect. And we are on Zoom every 2 weeks, and we talk about mental health and the stigmas within our communities and our culture, and how we build across not just generations, not across the different intersectional identities around migrant work and around folks' age and even across the diaspora, building a community of wellness and healing that we're continuing to build to this day. So even though this this community organizing space and project started off around the Traffic Teachers Campaign, it's beautiful to see how following the needs of the community has led to all these other new avenues of not just research, but more so healing, collective organizing, and community wellness being at the center of everything.
That was terrific. And a perfect way to end the panel today. Thank you. Can I get everyone to give them a great big round of applause? Thank you. So we have a couple of QR codes. If you'd like to know more about all of our wonderful speakers today, scan and read more about their bios. If you are interested in participating in the Community Engaged Research Cluster that Ellen leads, here's the interest form, and we'll be initiating some of those activities very soon. It's a way for us to not only bring together people who may have interest in engaging with the community, but to ensure that there is a broader awareness of all of the activities, as well as all of the constraints, right? Or the, not constraints, but the aspects that trickle into things like RTP and whatnot. So it's important for us to really understand what it means to be engaged with the community, to utilize qualitative methods, and to do that in an ethical and responsible way. So with all of that, please give our speakers another round of applause. Thank you to those who are online and joined us that way. We will be distributing a recording of the session today. And without further ado, we have some food in the background, in the back of the room, and that I hope you will be able to continue to enjoy with us as we continue to network and learn about each other's interests. Thank you again.